Why, hello. I'm trying a new approach today where I use my computer screen to read the chat and my phone to record. However, here we go. So, of course, this is a learning experience. Okay, I think I can see everything now. And it's close enough to 1 o'clock. I know I said I'd be doing this at 12:30, and then I realized that 12:30 is good if everything goes exactly as planned, which is rare. So 1 o'clock is a better time, and that will be the time moving forward for live streaming of Topic Tuesday from Taekwondo Guide. And that's me. I'm your Taekwondo guide, Paul Van Squike, and welcome to this week's edition of Topic Tuesday. Let's start with your topics that you guys sent in to me. I have one here from Steve Carp 3325, which says, "Hello, Master Paul. It's been great to see your channel evolving, growing, and trying new approaches and formats. My question for you is about pacing in sparring. My adult class is mixed belts and ages, and we recently started light sparring with classmates to pressure test techniques and concepts from class. I'm really enjoying this, putting together blocks, strikes, and kicks, and using them in real life. But I'm having trouble with pacing my energy. I tend to go all fists of fury for the first opponent, but then I'm sucking wind and on the back foot when we have longer bouts or when we rotate partners and face other classmates who are more experienced or more advanced. Are there strategies to sparring in terms of good use of one's energy and attacks/defenses, or is this a case of needing to work on cardio a whole lot more? For context, I'm a high blue belt, 55 years old, fairly fit, been going to Taekwondo classes 2 times a week for about a year and a half. And I exercise 6 to 7 days a week. Thank you in advance for your time and consideration." Great question, Steve. This is actually one that I get fairly frequently and that I talk about with my sparring coach because the approach that people want to take for sparring fitness, someone left a telephone at my school and that is what is ringing, so I apologize. The person who left that phone will get thousands of knuckle push-ups for interrupting this live stream. Okay. When it comes to cardio and sparring, there's 2 ways you can approach solving the problem. One is to improve your endurance, to fill up or to create a bigger gas tank to fill up, I guess you could say. Now, in this approach, the best way to do it is by mimicking the things that you're going to be doing in sparring anyway. So things like rounds on a heavy bag and shadow sparring, things that are just like sparring, are going to give you the best bang for your buck. Certainly, if you go and jog, it's not going to hurt anything, but it's not giving you context-specific fitness. Now, more importantly than trying to get a bigger gas tank, though, is, just as you're talking about in your question, learning to pace yourself appropriately. Because even if you get a bigger gas tank, if you make the same mistake and just spend all your energy immediately, you could have the biggest gas tank in the world and you'll still run into the same problem. So we all have limited energy. No one can just infinitely kick and spar. Obviously, some are going to be better than others, but you need to learn your body, learn the types of movements that drain it, and then learn to use them sparingly and appropriately during your matches. The other thing is to just remember concepts such as breathing and relaxing while you're sparring, which is very difficult. When we get into that fight or flight mode, we tend to do things that in competitive environments are destructive to us. So we tense up, we hold our breath, when we strike, use everything we have, even if the technique is one that's not timed appropriately and thus just hits nothing but air. So how do you do that? Well, remind yourself of it while you're sparring. Try to take little snapshot moments and analyze what your body's doing. Am I too tight? Am I holding my breath? And concentrate on breathing while you do it. One thing you can even practice is doing rounds on a heavy bag and concentrating on just moving your body, throwing your techniques without holding your breath and seizing everything up, and seeing how much power you can generate just by tossing your body and using very little tension. That's something you can get pretty good at. But pay attention to how you're doing it within your actual sparring. But the only real way to get there, of course, is by practicing lots of sparring. And yes, you're right, if you're running out of energy, no matter your age, that's a problem, because it just means you're not using an appropriate, how shall I say this? When you spar, you're using more than you should too quickly, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So by doing regular sparring, you'll start to intuitively be able to calculate the amount of energy you have starting out and how to apply it judiciously and economically so that you get the most out of your techniques. Some people just need to throw less techniques. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. This idea that you have to constantly be go, 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 especially if you're not competing, if you're just talking about sparring in class, is not true. You can pace yourself so that you can get through all of your rounds and not I don't want to say leave everything. Let me rephrase this. Don't think that I'm saying you shouldn't try. What I'm saying is that you should know how to get to the end of the night without getting so gassed that people can use you for target practice. There's nothing wrong with using up your energy by the end of the night, but if you're having half of a round where someone can just kick you or punch you at will, that's a problem. You need to maintain enough energy where you're not a floating target that they can just tee off on. But good question. You are absolutely right. Efficiency and learning to economize your energy is absolutely critical, and I think it's much more important than trying to get a bigger gas tank when it comes to building cardio. All right, you guys, I see some comments are coming in. I will get to you, but I'm going to start with what was written in from last time. So keep them coming in the live chat if you'd like me to address your comment for today. Next we have John Stallions 5313. Question for next topic Tuesday. Number 1, from your experience, what is the primary reason students enroll in your Taekwondo program? Let's start with that. It's the mythology of martial arts, right? It's the same sort of myth that we all tell ourselves, that through martial arts we can transform who we are. Now, some people might want to become better fighters, some might want to lose weight. Those reasons can vary, but ultimately it's always about self-transformation. You do it because you want to be a better person. That, and it looks fun, right? Now, my primary student body is children, and children, of course, are inundated with all of the TV shows featuring martial arts, whether it be in the form of ninjas or Cobra Kai. And so there's a strong mythology that when you put your mind to something and you practice hard, you become a better person. And they make it look very attractive. They make you look invincible when you do that sort of training, which of course isn't entirely true. In fact, it's far from true. But it's a mythology that brings a lot of people in the door. That myth of going on the hero's journey and becoming a more capable version of yourself. That's what martial arts is all about. Whether or not it can deliver to the extent that of what something like Cobra Kai would show is beside the point. It's still all about that hero's journey and becoming a better version of yourself. Number 2, John writes, what is the primary reason students drop out or leave before advancing through their belt system? That's tough. It's going to depend on each individual. I wish I knew if there was one big reason beyond all others. But if I had to guess, I would say it's that they feel like they've plateaued. In the beginning, the first year or two of your training, you see yourself make incredible strides because you're learning all sorts of things that you just had no understanding of before. So you go from 0 to 100 really quickly. You've got all these new techniques to develop, and there's a real challenge in front of you because it's all new. It's exciting. Now, once you get past your first couple years, you know the foundations of the techniques. There's not a lot of new stuff to learn. It's here and there, but you know how it works. The mystery element has been removed. And your progress has slowed down to the point where you usually don't notice it. You have to zoom out. You have to watch a video of yourself a year before. And sometimes you only make progress in a particular area. So maybe a year ago your pumse looked almost the same, but your sparring has improved a little bit. So the plateau makes it difficult because you no longer see your progress as viscerally. I think those are the two big things. You don't see your progress as viscerally, and the mystery has been removed. You know how the system works. You understand the techniques. You understand maybe more that they aren't going to make you a superhuman. To get to a level of even mediocre competency, you have to work your butt off. Wouldn't it be nice if you could handle a group of thugs training 2 hours a week with no trouble, like they were toddlers, handle them like they were nothing? That would be wonderful, right? But to be able to do something like that, you have to be at the level of a professional fighter or higher. Maybe it's not even reasonable at that level. Maybe it's something that is reserved only for the very genetically gifted. Point being that there's more effort than you thought there would be to get to the higher levels. And so that can be discouraging as well. I wish I knew exactly what it was, if there was one big key reason, like you're suggesting. But those are two that I would speculate are big. And then, of course, people just have things change in their life. Some people move away. Some people want to try other sports. If their kids coming up through school, they only get one chance to try a lot of the school sports, so they want to devote their time to that. Girls come along. I used to joke with my sparring coach that we should open a service where we sabotage teenagers' relationships for other schools so that they don't lose their teenage students. Of course, I'm only kidding, but that is a reason we see people drop, certainly. All right, the next question from ASP9440, who writes, Paul, how would you mix Taekwondo with boxing? Would you suggest looking at and incorporating kickboxing combos, or just try to place kicks and punches according to one's logic? That's a really interesting question, and one that's hard for me to answer. I guess the first thing I would ask you is what you're trying to accomplish by mixing these two things. If you want to be a good kickboxer, then yes, you should make it look like kickboxing and learn as much kickboxing as you can. And I think when you say you want to be a competitive kickboxer, when you study in their format and learn how to operate in that context, then you can transplant a lot of the stuff that you developed in Taekwondo over to that kickboxing context. But you should learn inside of their context for a while to understand exactly where the timing and appropriate use of those techniques is. If you're wanting to do point fighting, then it looks entirely different. You need to develop the tools inside of that context. So it really depends on what you're trying to do by mixing the hand techniques with the kicks. That's why it's really difficult to answer. But I guess what I would say is look to the context of what you're trying to do to inform you. If you want to be good at point fighting, study the point fighters. If you want to be good at kickboxing, study the kickboxers. If you want to develop what we call self-defense techniques. You could study people like Ian Abernethy, who show you how to incorporate the techniques of Taekwondo or Karate from a close range clinch fighting context. So find the context you want to operate in and then study from the people who are good inside of that context. That is all of my pre-written questions. So let's see if this live stuff is paying off. Let's see if we have any questions in here. Okay. So we got a lot of hellos, but I have from Alistair Korstofine, sorry. I know you've written in before. When sparring, can I use a guard I feel comfortable with? Yes, that's a good question. When sparring, can I use a guard I feel comfortable with? There's no right or wrong way to spar if you're talking about just getting points on the board. You have to stay inside of the rules. So you can't use a guard where your leg is up constantly and you're using your leg as a shield. That would be breaking the rule. It would be blocking with your leg. But as long as you're inside of the rules, you're certainly welcome to experiment with and use what feels right to you. Everyone's going to develop slightly different approaches to winning matches. Now, what I would recommend is that you watch the people at the very top, because a lot of them have isolated things that work very good within the context of Olympic Taekwondo sparring. And there's going to be some commonalities among those things. Certainly, everyone's going to make it their own, but you're not going to see anyone at the very top of the game using a high guard boxing stance for Taekwondo sparring. It just doesn't seem to offer any real benefit inside the context of Olympic sparring. And so it's been weeded out. If it worked good, there'd be people at the very top using that approach. So I would use what's recommended by the highest athletes as a framework, and then make the micro adjustments you need to make it your own. So in other words, take their principles, but internalize it in your own way. That's a really good question. Don't feel like you have to be a robot. You can't there's no such thing as sparring pumse, an exact way to do every technique when you're talking Olympic Taekwondo, because all that matters is that you get more points on the board than the other person. And the points are earned by appeasing the laws of physics, not by demonstrating to a judge that you've done the technique correctly. This might be different in some of the point fighting systems where they look to proper execution of the technique. I think this is big in like the JKA, Shotokan point sparring type karate, where the judges need to see the technique performed a very particular way in order for it to score. But we don't have that problem. So do what feels best for you if it's working. Make the outcome the primary indicator of whether or not it's useful. All right, that's a great question. Let's see if we have any others. I have from, I think this is in a Russian font, so I can't read what it says, but it says, the question is, can you do the splits? You know, I could do a center split really nicely for a very long time. I hope to get back to it. I am still working on solving this little hip issue that I've talked to you guys about. I hate to even talk about it because the more you dwell on things, the more you can tend to exacerbate a problem. So I don't like to think of it as a problem, but since you asked, it does block me right now. If I spend a long time, like warming up, tightening, relaxing, I can probably get pretty darn close still, but it's not within my capability anymore. The long version, I could never quite get. I was always a few inches above the ground on that one. But yeah, center I got down. In fact, I have a photo of myself doing it on some chairs, because that's always a fun photo to take, right? Let's see if there's anything else in here. I'm not seeing any comments from you guys. I do have one question, and it probably won't get me an immediate response today, so you can leave it in the comments for next week. But I have what might be a problem. I'm always really intrigued by martial arts that make claims about doing things, generating force in a different way from what we conventionally think about it like. An example would be Aikido. I've spent a lot of time studying Aikido because there was this fascination with the idea of being able to generate force without using standard athleticism. And every time I go down that path, it does not deliver. There's always some trickery involved, or it's just not what it was cracked up to be. And yet, story after story persists of people running into these characters who possess a type of force generation that blows their mind. It's something they've never come across before. That's why, supposedly, Morihei Ueshiba, who founded Aikido, developed such a following, because all these people would come in, trained martial artists or just thugs off the street. They would come in and they would try to hit him or throw him, and they would describe just falling down and not understanding how they hit the floor. It's a wild idea. You think it gets reported so many times, there must be something to it, right? But I've never encountered it in my life, even trying to seek it. So I wrote it. I usually write it off as like some sort of hypnotism or something like that, and recenter my mind on things that are more practical. But it always lurks in the back of my brain. Is this out there somewhere? Surely it would have exhibited itself in competition. Surely we'd have seen it by now. Well, I was feeling pretty good, had written it out again. And then this guy starts populating on my YouTube feed named Adam Meisner. Has anyone heard of this guy? He's a Tai Chi expert. And he's got all these videos, tons and tons of videos of him sort of projecting people with what looks like almost no force, and the people being projective describe the same thing, this feeling of just being moved and it not registering with them as anything conventional. What do you guys think? Has anybody heard of him? Has anybody experienced that before? Or is it another case of hypnotized students, or a simple circus trick that works for one setting but is completely useless in all the other settings? Has anybody heard of this guy? Has anybody experienced anything like this legitimately? You know, one story that still really is interesting to me is Ramsey Dewey, who is completely skeptical when it comes to the use of chi or something like that. Said he once sparred with an old man, Tai Chi master, someone who I want to say was like at least 80 years old when Ramsey Dewey grappled with him. And Ramsey Dewey's an athletic guy, and he would have been a lot younger at that time. And he said this Tai Chi master just manhandled him like it was nothing. Now, is that just a super fit, super genetically gifted 80-year-old? Or is there something interesting out there that most of us don't understand, that most of us are missing when we apply conventional athletics to our understanding of how to generate power? That's an interesting idea to me. Whether or not it ever amounts to anything other than curiosity, I don't know. But I'm throwing it out there for my audience, because I am curious if any of you have ever encountered anything unusual like that. Tell me what your story is on the subject, if you have encountered it. Or if you know this Adam Meisner character, if you have experienced why he's not what he purports to be. I'd be interested. All right, I think that is everything for today. I'll check the chat one more time. I think I got all of the questions there. Maybe. Oh, here we go, live chat. Yeah. So I've enjoyed this live edition of Topic Tuesday. And if you didn't tune in live, Just as always, you can drop your comments below and leave a topic, and I will address it next time. And don't forget that I have a website, tkdguide.com, and it has some context-specific exercises you can do. It's free. It's a video course, along with some informative video courses and some paid content if you're interested in a highly detailed Pumse training or a sparring course with some excellent drills to help you develop reflexes for sparring. Thank you as always, and until next time, enjoy your training.